Okay. Can you hear me though?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to call the work session to order with roll call
Mayor Lundberg,
here.
Councillor Van Gordon,
Here.
Councillor Moe,
Here.
Councillor Moore,
Here.
Councillor Stair,
Here.
Councillor Woodrow,
Here.
Okay.
and Councillor Piccinini.
Present.
Okay. So we have two things on the agenda, the work session agenda tonight. The first is a Booth Kelly, it looks a little funny, COVID-19, Booth Kelly and city property lease impacts. And Courtney is here for the report. Yes?
Yes, I am here.
Good.
Want me to jump in?
Yes, please.
Okay. So in front of you, and I'm not running the screen, but in your packet, we have given you some information on what's currently occurring with tenants at Booth Kelly, but even since the time of writing that agenda item summary, we've seen more impacts in non-payment from tenants. Initially, we were giving you numbers that looked at about 8 of our 25 tenants at Booth Kelly and those impacts in non-payment. We're now moving up to about 11, and that's including some of the properties elsewhere in the city as well. The graph in the AIS is showing you on the blue bar the requested abatement amounts when we were speaking specifically to those tenants when we wrote this AIS, and the green was our proposal around a potential abatement strategy. So you'll see that they're asking for support in March, but really in April, May, and June. And then they were trailing that through December, kind of on average asking for 4 to 6 months of abatement. We are actually requesting support or your authorization or your head nod for allowance to do 3 months of abatement with a tenant. And what we've done some application for CARES funding to try and recoup funds. Unfortunately, it was determined that it was ineligible for us to do that. We just learned that. Tenants have been applying for resources. Many of them are still struggling and have yet to receive word on their payroll protection applications, and they have still not, in some cases, received their EIDL payments either. So they're in some difficult positions. A large portion of our tenants fell under the mandatory order for closure. And so their horizon of operation is somewhat unknown. So what we're asking for is the ability to, what we're looking at is to be able to do up to 3 months of abatement. It might be that we have that look a little different for every tenant. Some may want to have that look like a discount on rent over a longer period of time. Some may, who are reopening now, may look to call that abatement the last several months and start to make payment now. We're just trying to stay in close communication with them and understanding that they're all pretty unique in their needs, and none of them were expecting a pandemic. Our sense is we're in kind of a unique position as a government entity in that we're both in the position of trying to be a solid landlord on a piece of property and have it make financial sense, but we're also really heavily invested in the viability of these businesses as Springfield businesses long-term. So we're trying to balance those two perspectives as a landlord in what we're proposing here. Just want to answer any questions or talk through any of this that you all might have.
Leonard?
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. So, Courtney, we're basing these abatements on the assumption that July 1st we're wide open for business, right?
Not necessarily. We're trying not to make any assumptions about what the horizon looks like. We're actually trying to base this on an expectation that winter or fall might be hard. And so while 3 months of abatement might seem like a lot more than one, it's sort of an effort to try and limp them forward now so that they can be more prepared for a potential additional set of hardships. Many of them have been able to reopen on modified service, but in fact, I was just on a call with one right before 5 who is pretty wary and is they're still very limited by occupancy restrictions that will stay in place all the way through phase 2 and until there's a vaccine. So they're really acknowledging that they're in this probably till early next year.
So the CARES subsidy that we're counting on to offset these abatements that we're looking at, do we have any idea of the prospects of actually landing that CARES grant?
We do now. We were hopeful, but we've received determination from the state that it is not an eligible expense to be reimbursed. So we would not be reimbursed that. At this point, you know, we don't carry any debt on the property, so it doesn't have an immediate cash issue. Like there's not an issue in the 618, the Booth Kelly fund. But it does not look like we can recoup that cost as a city.
But we are we paying ourselves property tax on these properties that we own?
The tenants are paying property tax on the properties.
Tenants.
So when there is abatement, then we are also abating that property tax and paying that tax bill ourselves for that duration, yes.
Is that being added in to the total cost of this?
It is.
The property tax?
Yes. Yeah, because of the way that we handled their their lease and factor it in when we say 3 months of abatement of their lease, we're acknowledging abatement of their per square foot, the tax that might be on the space but not on their business, and also any common area fees.
Okay, and these owners, this is the last question, I promise.
No problem.
The owners of these properties, are they all local? Are they are the owners
Yeah.
mostly from here?
Yeah, I'm just kind of going through they're all local. Only one of them is a kind of national franchise, but it's a local owner who.
So
she-
so the franchisee is the one paying the property tax and the rent, not the corporation.
Correct. Yeah, they basically just pay a membership to use the brand.
Got it. That's all I got. Thank you.
Yeah, and if you have more, it's okay.
Sherry.
So I had a question. You said there were 11 tenants at this point who are
Yeah.
requesting abatement
Or in non-payment.
or in non-payment? Okay. So my question has to do with potentially, are there other tenants who may also need potential help? And, you know, I'm kind of wondering if we're doing this for 11 tenants, is that going to create some problems for those other tenants that, you know, wow, we didn't think about asking for that or whatever. You know, I'm just wondering if there is if that's something that we should make generally known, or have you made that generally known to them, or have you talked to each tenant?
So we have not talked with every single tenant. What we have done is talked with those tenants who are in non-payment, or some who are recently in non-payment started reaching out. Some have not reached back. So those negotiations would still need to occur. We really need them to communicate with us. The majority
Right.
are proactively. I think that, you know, one proposal might be to look at this ability to negotiate with, or work with each of these tenants with a 3-month abatement as a tool that we can use. As more tenants start to see their reality of need or impact in later months, we could come back and do another update about where we are and additional needs that have been presented. We could also move forward acknowledging that, you know, we have a head nod to use this level of tool should a tenant need it, even if they're not showing hardship right now. when we look at the trending of industry, commercial retail was hit hardest, soonest, and at the greatest volume. We're seeing the impact to manufacturing and industrial coming in a later wave. And so while a lot of our industrial tenants are slightly more solvent right now, we are talking with them about their concerns over supply chain and being able to process invoices. And so there may be future conversations in that category.
I guess that would be my concern, is that we, you know, I understand being equitable to the tenants that right now are showing a need, but I also am concerned that we have the ability at least to listen to and talk to other tenants about, you know, future needs. But,
Yeah.
you know, I also understand as a landlord, the difficulty of, we don't have any real outstanding payments against those properties, but we do have a lot of maintenance that we have to, most of the money, has been coming in and going into general fund, or been going into a separate fund?
It's been going into two places. There is some going into general fund, but we do have a capital set aside that is quite healthy right now. The Booth Kelly reserve is pretty healthy. And I know Nate, I think, is in the quote unquote audience on this, but he and I talked earlier, and this really would be hardly a notable impact on that reserve fund. I think we're looking at the place where we have a shared long-term goal with this tenants, which is that we reemerge on the other side with them in place and able to
Right.
pick up pace and resume operation. I think we're concerned, we don't want to come out on the other side with vacancies. Our concern is if we go right to deferment or too many months of deferments, it will tack on to the end in such a way that they'll either be motivated to vacate now out of fear that they can't make that payment. A lot of them are making that decision about, do they just close at this point and start over when the future is more known, and we'd rather have them stay.
So when you say abatement, do you mean we're just not collecting at all for those 3 months, or is it a percentage, or what are you referring to?
So abatement would be that we would not collect for those 3 months or for that amount at any time, not now or not in the future.
Okay.
They likely would need additional relief to that, and we are saying that we would take those funds and we'd defer them. So we would agree to tack them on to the other side of the event at a specific given time and sort of amortize it out in addition to their monthly rent. And I think that's what the businesses are trying to balance. How much can they carry on a normal rent on the other side of this?
Okay. Those are my questions. Thank you.
Are there other questions or comments? Sean?
So I guess I'm comfortable with the approach. I know it's really early on to see and finalize our, to finalize an approach. But like, we're going to know more in the next couple of months. And I think, yeah, I think as we get into the fall, I'm willing to, like, if we're getting feedback that what we're doing is not working, we can adjust it at that point. But like, in my mind, keeping viable businesses sort of in there and trying to keep them going is a good priority. Making sure that we're effectively, looking at the property as a whole and trying to keep our vacancy rate low is a priority. But also for people that are functioning through the middle of this, recognizing that we can't just simply give all the rent away, right? Like, if people are in a place where the business is relatively healthy and they have the ability to pay, they should pay.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think we, one of the things we have done is we asked them some pretty detailed questions about what they were experiencing and those impacts. I think continuing that conversation so that we can say we truly we have a true idea of what's going on, and it's not just a opportunistic moment. Although the quicker we can get them viable and making money, it's a good sign for the economy. We don't want to be taken advantage of either, and we understand that.
Yeah, but if we get into this and we need to come back and have a conversation again, I'm more than willing to do that, because there's so many moving parts right now that, like, we may have it, this may be the perfect approach, and we may not have it. So I'm open to different ways to get to what our goal is. Our goal is to get the economy open again.
I appreciate that a lot.
So I have one more question, Christine.
Yes,
Sorry
Sherry.
about my cuckoo clock. So I have one more question. You mentioned other properties besides Booth Kelly. Are you talking about our downtown property?
No, so we have not included any of our properties that were vacant prior to COVID.
Okay.
And we did have one that was planned, the business had planned to exit their lease and had actually served us notice before COVID. And so while it looked like they moved because of, they actually hadn't. So we're not including that. So in the 25-ish active lease spaces we have, those are active, not vacant. 11 of them are dealing with impacts at this moment. It does include some properties that we have in Glenwood. Right now, we are not seeing substantial impact in our downtown properties, though.
Okay, thank
Other
you.
than Booth Kelly.
Okay. Other comments or questions? Joe and then Steve.
I think Steve had his hand up before me. Christine, go ahead, Steve.
Thank you, Joe. I think we should be expecting if June isn't going to be long enough. So be prepared. It's going to go on longer. So just keep that in mind as we do this.
You can't see me, but I'm giving you the nonverbal head nods in agreement.
Christine?
Yeah, go ahead, Joe.
Okay, all right. So no, I agree. I don't hear anybody disagreeing with this plan. I think everybody thinks that it's pretty well thought out, and I think that I agree with all of them. I think that to do nothing would be foolish, and I think to do something what we can would be wise, and to put a 3-month on it, basically knowing exactly that just like Sean and Steve mentioned, and everybody else is probably thinking that 3 months is probably not going to be long enough, but it's a good check-in. And whatever we got to look at, and it could be a whole different set of facts, but what you got here shows that there's good work, and I'm glad that you're being a good steward of our assets, and that we're not handing anything out. It's just something that we need to do to keep businesses sustained in the best manner. So I'm pretty darn happy with that plan. It shows that there's a lot of work behind it.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Christine?
Marilee.
Yes, I'm just going to chime in and say, yes, I think the 3-month abatement at this point is good to put out in front, and we remain open to anybody that needs or has something to further discuss at the end. I think we all think maybe that's probably going to happen, but at this point we need to be receptive to where they are and what their problems are, and see if we can, be helpful and a partner in this, so that they feel that way and feel comfortable and feel like they're being heard.
Okay. So I'll chime in here. We've been here before, and we've had to do abatements before, and a variety of techniques. I think that we need to keep in mind that the businesses that need the abatements, they're obviously not in a good financial position. So where we are at the end of this period, may also be one where we're going to have to look at having vacancies perhaps, because not because of us, but because the business just simply has to make a decision about trying to stay open in Booth Kelly and not doing something different. So it always brings me back to where I've been for quite a while, which is this kind of started with a Booth Kelly discussion. At one time, it was just such a great asset for the city to have this property that basically brought us in a great deal of money, and we could spend it in the general fund, whatever. And we were, your basic landlords. And then we went through a recession where we did have to look at what did we want to do with the property, and it was don't do anything to it, maintain it with a minimum amount of work, or put some money into it. So we've never chosen more than just put enough money and to keep it open and be able to rent it out. But we've never really put in the big dollars that it needs. So it always brings me back to when we're in this situation is, what do we want to do with that property? Do we want to continue to be landlords, or do we want to at some point look at it in terms of private development, which has been a real winner for us basically in the downtown core. So I'm fine with what we're doing now, but at some point after a period of time, I would like to be looking at that assessment of the property again and figure out, not knowing how much really we would need to put into those buildings, and whether or not somebody, we have had conversations with one owner or of a business and what they might want to do. Are there other folks that might want to go in? Does it make sense to sell one piece of it, or it should stay the same? We need some expert guidance in terms of what we do, because the economy is going to go up and down periodically, and what is in the best interests of the city in the long term. So wanting to revisit that. So I'm going to put that out there for a future discussion and information that we had started to have those, to take a look at that. And I understand not doing it immediately, but definitely take a look at it in the future. But I'm fine with, trying to help folks out now.
Okay, and absolutely on that point, it's definitely been at the higher point in our work plan list. So we'll talk with Nancy and Neil and make sure we keep that on the radar for a sooner than later discussion.
Okay, good deal. Are there other questions? And that was enough information, Courtney, for you?
Yes.
Okay, good deal. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you, appreciate you.
You too. Okay, so we have one other item on the agenda, which is our Main Street initial safety solutions options.
Good evening, Mayor, councilors. I'm trying to get this presentation to work. Okay. We're here tonight to talk about the Main Street Safety Project.
Do you want to start?
I'm sorry,
It is Molly. Yep. Yes. Okay.
Yep. Sorry, this is Molly Markarian.
We're just guessing.
Yep. So speaking of which, so this is Main Street Safety Project, collaborative effort between the city and ODOT. So even though you can't see any of us, I do have here with me tonight John Boskett, who's our consultant project manager from DKS. Jean Lawson with JLA Public Involvement, Bill Johnston, our ODOT project manager, and then our city staff team. And I'm going to hand it over to Jean to share a bit about what we're going to be talking about tonight and asking from you.
Okay.
Okay. Hi, all. This is Jean. It's been such a long time since I've seen you all. You all look like you're weathering all of this pretty well. So it's been quite a while since we've gotten together, and we've hit a major milestone in the project. So this is one of those points where we really need to meet with you, bring you up to speed, give you an update on what we've heard, what the team has studied, the findings of the study, and the direction that the team is suggesting for next steps, and make sure that we are all on the same page before we take that step. So with that in mind, I want to basically give you a preview of what the team has come to. As you know, this has been going on. There's been extensive study, technical work, extensive stakeholder outreach and public outreach. Molly is going to, in a moment, just give you a refresher on what the process has been to get to that. John Boskett, the managing director for DKS, is going to bring you up to speed on, well, begin by reminding you what we studied, all of those different alternatives and elements, and then what the analysis showed. And then Molly is going to talk about what we heard from the public. And then John will present the findings and the recommended direction. And basically, just to cut to the chase, because you had a very important agenda item on before this, so I think we have a little less time. I want to make sure you've got the end point in mind. The team is really suggesting carrying most of those elements forward for more analysis into the next phase, and but narrowing the focus by eliminating a couple of them that don't seem to be able to be, that aren't as competitive. Analytically, they don't perform as well. And John will talk about what those are. So really, in the end, what we're hoping is to take you through that, give you all of the information, so you've got that as you talk to your constituents, and get your input on that direction. So with that, just start with the refresher on what the purpose of the study is. And if you remember, we worked through this at a couple of city council work sessions. And the fundamental piece coming down to it is that the purpose of this project is to select infrastructure solutions that will make streets safer for people walking, biking, driving, and taking transit. And you have the whole statement there with the context of that, again, that the selected improvements need to provide for movement of goods and people, support economic viability, accommodate current bus, etc. So that's the context. That's what the fundamental purpose of this is. And also, if you remember, we went through a process of identifying values. We went through a work session with the City Council, with the Stakeholder Advisory Committee, and with the general public, and to identify the core values, translate those into goals and objectives and criteria. And so that's what you see before you. And remember, those are there to give you the input to analyze. They're not a recipe to make a decision. So, so that's the refresher on the context for this. Any questions before we get going further? Okay, all right, Molly.
So just a reminder that the project area is on Main Street from 20th to 72nd. And as we look at possible solutions to address the safety problem, and we're moving through the solution refinement process, the no build condition, we're including that for comparison, but since no build does not meet the project's purpose and need, a true no build would not be considered a solution. And then as we continue moving through the refinement stages, we're moving closer to a draft facility plan, an outcome that will give businesses, property owners, and the community at large more certainty about the future of Main Street, and will bring us closer to the design phase that will ultimately result in even more certainty. So John is going to talk now through the elements that we studied and considered to address the safety problem.
Hey, good evening. So the way we presented the improvements at this point in the project, it was really called elements. So it's kind of these different options for the ways that we can improve safety through different options on various parts of the street. So those key areas or key elements being, the intersections, how we control those, different ways of applying raised medians, different types of bicycle infrastructure, different types of, pedestrian treatment. And then we also acknowledge that whatever we do, we need to be compatible with enhanced corridor transit improvements in the future, because that was the transit mode of choice recommended by the governance team about a year ago. Go ahead and change the slide. So just briefly touching on each of those and, the options that we presented. For intersection control, we presented, the options of converting the major intersections to roundabouts or keeping them as traffic signals. The reason we would propose doing roundabouts for a safety project is they have tremendous crash reduction potential. And good thing to note is that even if we don't change the intersections from signalized today, they're still going to need a fair amount of improvements that are also going to have right-of-way impacts, whether that's for ADA upgrades in the future. Some of them are going to need new turn lanes just to accommodate more demand in the future. And, was roundabouts, just by their kind of natural design, easily accommodate U-turns. With the signalized intersections, we would need to do some additional widening to get those to fit. With raised medians, the way we kind of framed these up was we're wanting to kind of have the conversation about the trade-offs that they present. As this graphic shows, if you're looking at maximizing safety on one end of this by putting in raised medians but not allowing a lot of openings in them, you're also not going to have tremendous accessibility. The other end of the spectrum, we can have a lot of accessibility. Maybe that's no medians or just a lot of openings in those medians. And now we're probably not going to get a lot of the safety benefits, because kind of by their nature, the point of raised medians is to stop accessibility or turns. It's really to just kind of limit the number of places where they're going to happen, so people aren't turning all over the place. Just to make the driving experience more predictable and easier to process. And then kind of in the middle, we've got this balanced safety and access zone. So if you want to go to the next slide. Kind of the way we presented this, again, discussing those trade-offs, at the maximized safety end, we said what that could look like is something like maybe we only have openings at major intersections. But, that might cost you, maybe 2 minutes of extra, travel time if you were trying to get somewhere in the corridor, because you have to go probably a longer distance and U-turn somewhere. Then the next level down, where we're maybe balancing safety and access a bit better. We're probably still getting a lot of the safety benefit. But now we've got more openings. Maybe they're at major intersections, a number of the local streets that are connecting in there. And with U-turns, now we're probably cutting the outer direction travel time down to maybe a minute or less. And then at that far end of the spectrum, with minimal medians, again, this might be medians only at kind of select locations. A lot of openings in between them. Now we're probably not getting a lot of the safety benefit, overall. But the out of direction travel time is also going to be pretty minimal. It's probably it's probably 0 to 30 seconds. For bicycle infrastructure, we provided 4 different options. The first one being the conventional bike lane, similar to what's out there now. Today, they're actually 5-foot bike lanes. Conventional would be just increasing that a little bit to 6. The next step up, and these kind of all progressively provide more and more separation between people biking and motor vehicle traffic. So the next step up would be the buffered bike lane, somewhere in the 7 to 10 foot range. And as you can see, the major difference is that stripe between the bike lane and the cars can be 2 to 3 feet wide. So you get a little bit of extra space. Honestly, what I'm seeing happening in a lot more cities these days is the buffered bike lane is starting to become the standard that is replacing the conventional bike lane, which kind of used to be the typical or standard approach. At the next kind of step up is the at-grade separated bike lane. So it gets a couple feet wider than that buffered bike lane. And now the main difference is you've added some kind of vertical element in that double stripe zone. Could be something as simple as what you see in this photo with some like raised, plastic candlesticks. And then, at the farther end of the spectrum, we got a raised cycle track. So now we're taking the bikes off the roadway. They're not, on the same kind of plane with cars. They're not going to be behind the curb. Usually you're wanting to separate them by like a landscape strip to provide some kind of buffer and also to give them kind of a flat landing as they're crossing driveways. Next slide. So, and then for pedestrian facilities, fairly straightforward. Right now you've got curb tight sidewalks, so the sidewalk's right there against the curb. You're pretty close to traffic. And then the other option would be to provide some kind of buffer space, a landscape buffer in between the sidewalk and the motor vehicle travel way. Go ahead. So now I'm just going to kind of give you a quick overview of the analysis findings, and this is really just kind of the technical analysis, and it's how we assess these options kind of fared against the evaluation criteria that we set up. After this, Molly's going to tell you kind of by comparison what kind of feedback did we get from the committees and the public. So first couple of key findings were, raised medians and roundabouts easily have the greatest potential to improve safety. Tremendous safety benefits come from those. And then roundabouts also could be a very nice complement to raised medians because of the way they naturally accommodate U-turns. While we can do that at traffic signals, generally it's going to have more of an impact on delay at the signal because we need more green time to serve that movement. And also we probably would never be able to allow freight, emergency vehicles, bigger trucks to make those U-turns at a signal, whereas they could do it at a roundabout. Next slide.
Sorry.
Yeah, increasing the space between bikes and cars is obviously another key safety improvement. So, just as I showed that progression, right, the more separation we can provide, the better that could be. And then landscaping. Obviously, it's going to come with maintenance costs. But, it has the potential to improve the streetscape, could potentially be used for, to help treat stormwater. And it's kind of one of the key elements among everything in kind of helping support some placemaking. And again, key note on the landscaping, there are probably like three primary ways it could be incorporated into any of these. One could be if you have roundabouts, it could go into the island, median treatments, it could go on those, or then, it could also be done on, outsides of the curbs. Whereas the first two really don't incur any additional right-of-way impacts, right? With the last one, you may have to get additional right-of-way to accommodate that unless you did some kind of, frontage property swapping. And then the last one, you're keeping existing curb lines, minimizes cost but limits the improvement potential. So that's something we can look at, is trying to keep costs down by not moving the curb lines, because then stormwater systems get affected and everything else, regrading of the road. And then next slide. We might need to have a different design on the east side of Bob Straub Parkway, because ODOT has a designation on that part of the highway that has kind of more strict requirements for truck traffic. So we might have to have a different design to accommodate that. Obviously, maximizing U-turn opportunities is going to be important, with any median treatment. So we can still get a lot of the safety benefits, but we can reduce a lot of that out of direction travel and delay. And then wider cross sections, obviously they're going to come at a higher cost and more right-of-way impact to adjacent properties. The trade-off is that the more right-of-way we can use, potentially the more things we can do with it.
All right, so thank you, John. That was the technical analysis piece. And now I'm going to focus on the community feedback that we received on these elements. So the next 2 slides will cover the commonalities that we heard across all groups and forums when we sought community feedback. I'd say overall, community members definitely want to see safety improved on Main Street. There was not clear consensus on medians in terms of, I mean, there was a desire to see a balance, but what that balance looks like exactly varied across groups. Feedback we received also suggested looking at priority locations for roundabouts. We consistently heard from the community a desire for wider, buffered, separated bike facility, and so paired with that, removing the conventional bike lane option from consideration. We also heard across all groups that a landscaped buffer aligns with the Main Street vision, and so a desire to keep landscaping in the toolkit when it's appropriate. To prioritize the worst safety locations, the locations with the greatest safety problem in earlier phases. And there was definitely across all groups concern regarding the cost and feasibility of the more expensive options, and so an encouraging a more moderate level of investment through the toolkit idea. And so that's what we heard emphasized across all groups, and I'm going to go through each of the groups and share a couple of highlights that were in addition to those consistent. So from the Technical Advisory Committee, we heard that the right-of-way impact of roundabouts and signalized intersections is likely comparable when we consider the items that John talked about, such as turn lanes. And that we heard from the Technical Advisory Committee also that, you know, reiterating that medians would most greatly contribute to safety improvements. From the Strategic Advisory Committee, because it is comprised of various stakeholder interests, that group has very varied values and interests, and so we had a lot of conversations about trade-offs with that group. I would say that across the board, we did hear a desire to enhance bicycle and pedestrian travel, though, from that group. From the Planning Commission, for the most part, the Planning Commission reiterated the consistent themes that I noted earlier. Then the online open house, we held an online open house starting on March 4th, and we ended up extending it given the COVID circumstances until the end of April. And I think given the circumstances, we got really good feedback. And a lot of that feedback was pretty consistent with the input that we received from other groups looking for Springfield to improve safety with a moderate level of investment and feasible solutions. We also were able to do one focus group. We had planned to do 4 focus groups to gather feedback from traditionally underserved populations, so seniors, low-income households, youth, and Spanish-speaking households. We were able to get in the Spanish-speaking households focus group in early March, and so we added their feedback to other comments that we've heard from community members through email and phone calls for the project. So John?
So before John goes, we've just given you a whole lot of information. Do you have any questions about the analysis that John shared or the community feedback before we go to the next step? Yes, Councilor Starr.
Thank you. So my understanding is that U-turns are considered the most dangerous maneuver that you can make while you're on a public roadway. Is that right?
John?
No, I don't think that's true, actually. It's not what I've seen from research. I've actually seen specific research done where they were comparing, kind of a corridor with no treatment to one where afterwards they put in median treatments that did, U-turns. And they actually found that it was still safer with U-turns. So I haven't seen that, show up in any research to say that it's more dangerous.
Well, I'm just thinking intuitively. I mean, I'm making a left-hand turn and, I make a left-hand turn and I'm off the roadway. If I make a U-turn, then I'm still right there in the middle of the roadway and I'm going considerably slower than the flow of traffic. It just seems like it would be a maneuver that would cause more accidents. Is that wrong?
Well, like I haven't seen that actually bear out in practice where those treatments have resulted in more accidents. I think it's, like most treatments where, you make a change to the traffic control, sign it well, and people adjust to that.
Okay. This raised cycle track option, if we were to put raised cycle tracks on the side of the road, would they be available to pedestrians as well, or would it just be earmarked for bicycle traffic?
Well, the way I'd say the way that we've kind of framed it up thus far is that our preference certainly would be to separate bicycles and pedestrians first. Bicycles move a lot faster than people walking.
Sure.
And so, in a lot of cases, it's actually kind of seen as potentially dangerous if you don't have enough width so they can really be separated.
Yeah.
And it's just generally a preference by bicyclists too.
All right. So where we are right now is we're just asking questions about the particulars of the options.
Right.
Now, is that right? Okay.
Right.
I've got other things, but I'm going to defer that to the end of the discussion. Thank you.
Okay. And John, in your answer on the U-turns, I believe what you also have been saying is that it's the predictability of having designated places instead of sort of open to having turns anywhere. Yes.
Right. So yeah, at intersections, whether it's signalized or roundabouts, and then you see where you do have breaks in the medians. Again, you're signing them, and it's just like doing a lot of traffic control changes. It's clear signing, and then also make a big change like this, there'd be some kind of educational program to make people aware of how to use the corridor.
So any other questions on the community feedback or anything before we go on? Yes, Councilor Moore.
Well, I just had a question about, we've been talking about roundabouts quite a bit, and the picture that you showed at the beginning, which speaks loudly, showed an intersection and a roundabout. Roundabout was huge. Do they actually take that much more space, and does that then arise a lot of right-of-way concerns for businesses?
John, that would be you.
Yeah, not necessarily. Remember, as I kind of noted before, is even the signalized intersections, just to have enough capacity to keep delays down in the future. And some of those are going to need extra turn lanes, and so it's kind of where the right-of-way impacts are happening may be different, but it's not necessarily more. And our team has been working on some concept designs for roundabouts. Should we put them in? I think are showing more clearly how they would fit in. What the potential right-of-way impacts would be, and they're really not as big as you might think. They're probably pretty comparable to what you may end up doing in a lot of these traffic signals.
As far as right-of-way.
Right.
Okay, so then just one other question about roundabouts and pedestrians and bicycles. Is it more complex than to deal with the pedestrian bicycle flow with the roundabout as opposed to just a signal where I push a button to cross the street?
Yeah, the treatments are a bit different. What you see in a lot of, especially the multi-lane roundabout, is you may see like a pedestrian activated warning lights on those approaches. When you come up, you're still pushing a button to get traffic's attention, right? Usually they're already slowing down to enter the roundabout, so that helps too, the traffic. So they stop, and then you cross, usually in 2 stages. There's an island right in between the 2 directions of traffic, and then you proceed across the second side. So they're just kind of different treatments.
And so bicycles are moving with the flow of the traffic.
Yeah, a lot of times there are options for the bicyclist to exit actually as you enter into the roundabout, and then they kind of travel around the pathway around the outside with pedestrians, just between legs of the roundabout.
Okay, thank you.
So this is good, you all. It sort of highlights some of the trade-offs and why the team is recommending carrying some of these forward for more analysis. Yes, Councillor Van Gordon.
So I guess I have a question about the project overview slide and looking at the target timeline here. I guess it's a technical question. So if we're in almost summer of 2020, we've been doing this for 2 years, right?
Molly?
And Marilee's been doing it a lot longer than this. And so based on the timeline, if we're not going to get to a facility plan until 2022, is that the way I'm reading this correctly?
Molly, I think that's yours.
Yeah,
So, and based on the design, the safety specifications, right? Originally, there was a $3 million arts grant with a bunch of to do a raised median, and by the time we put those roundabouts, not a transportation engineer in general, but the number that I heard ODOT quote at Lane County Act was about $75 million to complete this project. Is that money identified?
That's
Molly,
right.
are you there? I think we lost Molly.
To see if we can get, yeah.
And Molly is the point person. Bill is also on. So Bill, can you address, if you're here and on as a panelist and can speak, can you address the question of whether that money is identified? Bill Johnston with ODOT. How about Brian?
Bill Johnston is having a technical issue. His mic is not working. This is AJ. Brian Barnett, your mic is unmuted and you should be able to speak.
Okay, am I being heard?
Yes.
Yes, you are.
Hi, Brian.
I don't know where the figure that Councillor Van Gordon referenced came from other than that Lane Act. Currently, the funding situation is that we have arts money that is associated with the median project, which was the original award of grant. Subsequent to that award of grant, then there was the Main Street transit study, and that transit study then got merged with a planning study, which is the study we're in right now for safety. And so the art money associated with the median project essentially is being held, and some of it was used for this, but ODOT brought other money to the table. The city, of course, has brought money to the table to do the study. And once the study is complete, then we can use that art money that yet remains, which is a substantial amount, and use that to the extent that it is applicable to medians, and look at other art money, and that it would be how we intend to fund the project. I would add that there could be stimulus money that would be becoming available, and there might be a program that this project area would fit. And the last thing I'll say is that it has never been expected that we were going to go from east to west in one project. This clearly will be broken down into manageable projects, both from a flow of money perspective, but also a flow of contractor resource and staff resource to deliver projects.
But you're saying in 2022, right, when we approve all of this and adopt all of this and do all this sort of process around it, money to build something.
I'm sorry, there was a cough right when you were finishing your statement.
Sorry,
So-
that was me.
When 2022 rolls around, is there going to be money to build anything?
Yes, there will be some money through the arts program to begin the project development stage. And yeah, I think it remains to be seen, is the current money that is allocated, is it going to be sufficient to do, I'll just arbitrarily, I'll say a 10 block length, like 32nd to 42nd as one example. Is that money going to be sufficient for that project? Well, it depends upon what kind of boundaries you put in this plan as to what we should or should not consider. But just for a median project, I think there could be funding in the arts program that would be sufficient for a segment.
So I'm going to interrupt at this point just because I know that you have a city council meeting coming up, and the issue of the funding and building is really important, but is not something that is on the critical path for this next piece. And we know that it's been a long time since you all have met. I want to make sure you hear what the team's recommendations are.
No, hang on, Jean.
I think
Hang
it's
on,
critical.
Jean. Hang on, Jean. You haven't,
Okay.
first off, you haven't even, I'm not on the screen.
I know, I can't
I'm
see you.
No, I know you can't, but people sitting here, I see there's frustration on their faces. So I think that, you know, whatever we're doing here is we're going to have to loop back because it's very frustrating. I mean, I'm listening to somebody say that roundabouts you're slowing down. That's not true. I go through that big double roundabout on Hayden Bridge, and by golly, somebody's going through the roundabout and they hit that where somebody's trying to cross and they are speeding up. They're not slowing down. So you're missing a whole bunch about that roundabout stuff. Also, I think that those cycle tracks, you know, I keep saying we could put the pedestrian bikes. I mean, you talk about how dangerous it is for a bike pedestrian, but right now you're talking about you're going to have the bikes out by cars, which is way more dangerous. So you know, there's a whole bunch of things that I don't think you're actually even considering. I think people are frustrated right here, right now, and we need to have another, maybe it's not so far out, but I'm not comfortable with what's going back out because my understanding is you're planning to go back out to the public shortly with whatever, and we're going to give you a thumbs up or not based on what we're looking at tonight, which I'm not comfortable with that. And Mara Lee had comments here too. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Can I just pop in? Thank you, Mayor. And Molly, I do, if you can, we might want to jump to the what's next before we get too far, so you know what that is. But I think I understand the frustration. So if we can't get where we need to get tonight, we just need to make sure we've scheduled something relatively soon for you all. Councillor Woodrow.
I know Sean wasn't done. I let Sean finish first.
Well, I guess I'm going to just end with like two comments, right? Like one of them is that what I'm not even sure what we're head nodding, right? Like, because you're going to go through all these four or five steps and you're going to come out with a design fee, you know, an approved design, but there's a ton of money here, right? That is fundamentally, going to, I guess, I need a little bit more context to what exactly we're head nodding, because, and then I guess, let me take a step back. Where does the 96-foot restriction come from that was in one of these slides? Is that the current width of the street right now, or is that right away to right away?
So two questions there. One is where does the 96-foot come from? And the other is what would you be head nodding? And so on the first, on the what would you be head nodding, it's not trotting out to the public right away. It is doing further analysis, and before they narrow to do further analysis, they wanted to get your input on whether the narrowing was appropriate. So, and I think, Mayor, you raised the issue of what might be narrowed out, and so is of concern. So John, can you answer the 96-foot question?
Yeah, I think the existing cross section is, I think it's 82 feet, if I remember right. The 96, I believe, was set as a kind of the recommended maximum footprint by the governance team. So it's that's what we've been working on. Is kind of the don't go bigger than this footprint.
Well, I guess, and again, I think the consistent feedback from council has been that could vary area to area, right? Like I mean, if 96 feet's the max, right? They're a little bit more close to that than other places, but where we've got open land right now, I'm okay with Main Street not being narrow, straight, I guess is what I'm saying, is that it could vary in length or width. And then I guess my other point is whatever we talk about from, bike safety all the way through, like, sort of throughput here, right? Like I guess I'm just more, we're going to be on this adventure forever, and at the end of the day, we owe the public to get something built that is actually going to improve safety, and I'm just not seeing where that ever ends.
No.
Good segue.
Yeah.
That's great. That's right where I wanted to be. That was my biggest issue at the moment, and that is in talking about financing and talking about prioritizing the safety elements along Main Street and deciding where you're going to go with what finances you have available at the moment, which could conceivably take the rest of the decade to get there. And again, we're talking about variations in the street, medians, everything else. How do we take that to the public and say, we want you to agree to accommodating this, but it could be another 5 years before that happens because we're going to work on this one down there. And to me, it's just so haphazard that before it gets to the point of a head nod and approving of taking it to that point, we need to have more. It needs to be more detailed. There needs to be more done with the information, because I find the information, I understand the information, but if I were a business owner out there on Main Street, I would be very confused as to what was going to happen when and how was it going to affect me and what did I have to agree with.
Well, how about, so Molly's got the next steps piece up here, but just on that, I do want to make sure John's had a chance to share with you what the Technical Advisory Committee and technical team has suggested. It is, Councillor Van Gordon, very much responsive to the idea of a balanced approach of phasing and not having a universal solution throughout the entire corridor. But it also, Councillor Woodrow, is a far cry from being ready to trot anything out to the public and say, this is what's recommended. You'd definitely be seeing more before that. And I'm saying all of this without being able to look to the project managers and say, am I getting out in front of my feet and saying anything that's not absolutely sure? So Molly, do you want to talk about the next steps, and then can we real quickly have John at least give you what the team had suggested, what the Technical Advisory Committee and team had suggested?
Yeah, and actually, I think Brian is going to jump in for a bit and talk in response to what some of the councilors were raising. And, because we're in this element concept stage right now, and getting through the planning phase to the design phase, which is what the business owners and the property owners will really be able to see what is possibly in store for their future. And so he was going to talk about that.
Yes, thank you, Molly. Councillor Smear, I understand your frustration. It has been 12 months since you've actually had your eyes on this project. So it's understandable that there's a little bit that has been lost in our translation, and there's a lack of continuity. I am very sorry that that's the circumstance we are in. To one point that Councilor Van Gordon made, we definitely have the intent to, when we are in the design phases, to right size the available land and the right of way to the facility that we think best at that point in time to plan for development and actually develop. what we are asking for in this larger plan, its entire purpose at present. Remember, our entire purpose was to bring the transit program into this program. Okay, so we have LTD in the boat, they're stroking an oar, we're at the rudder, we're taking care of business. But now we are at this point in time where we're trying to make sure we have the correct set of tools in the box to apply to that location specific design, and to take some tools out of the box so we don't spend time on them at that point. So today we are just simply seeking to get what that boundary is. And we've tried to present some of those different pros and cons. And I respect that you are confused right now. And that's on us to resolve that problem and come back to you in a short period of time so that we can get you fully on board and understanding what we're asking and why. And I'm going to present to you right now that it is our request that when we have that next discussion, that it is absolutely critical for us to get to construction and design phases to make decisions that allow us to then advance the overall facility plan to a conclusion. I will say very candidly that if you wanted to tell us, if you had consensus today on what you want to see, then we could start developing specifics around that. But the fact is we only have funding right now for one element, and that's called medians. And that's not the totality of what this corridor needs. Nobody presents it that way. Nobody expects it that way. But that at least was the catalyst that got us to this point of discussion. And so I'm glad for that. But I do acknowledge this is a very, very complex and tough issue. I'm not trying to put this off as we can't handle it or you can't handle it, but just that we are trying to exercise patience, and we know you are as well. So I think I'll stop there. If there's a question or comment about that, I'd be happy to receive it.
Councilor Pictionary. And Mayor, please take the reins anytime you. I know I'm here facilitating the work session on this, but take leadership, of course, whenever.
I will.
Okay, so if we're here, if I just heard Brian correctly, we're here basically to talk about, because we have money for the medians, that seems to be the highest priority for us meeting here today. That will give you enough information to start moving forward. But yet I am literally feeling inundated with a ton of information and people's opinions and theories, et cetera, and design that to me is not dealing with medians. Like, for example, I'm looking at some of these slides and I, for some reason, the conventional bike paths or bike lanes have been taken off the board by a committee. And they're no longer part of the equation. And so that's not even part of our decision-making process, but yet in the same breath, we're the ones that are supposed to be looking at design at some point. So that's been taken out of our decision-making process, it sounds like. It also sounds like when you have buffered bike lanes that are going to take 7 to 10 feet as opposed to 6 feet, and then you're talking about at-grade separated bike lanes that are going to take 9 to 12 feet, and then furthermore, the raised cycle tracks, they're going to take 11 to 15 feet. And I can tell you that I remember, and I was part of the approval process of the roundabout that has the raised cycle track in Glenwood, but going by there multiple times and even seeing it on the slide, I look at a ton of real estate that has been taken up for areas with concrete with people to walk on extra wide sidewalks that we approved that I thought were going to be shared. And now we have another whole lane for bicycles that have enough for 2 or 3 abreast. And so I'm looking at all these, and yet now we hear that, well, let's talk about the medians. And I'm saying, okay, well, I don't want to talk about bike lanes. I don't want to talk about all this other stuff unless we can build it. And it sounds like we can't build it right now. We're looking at the medians. So correct me if I'm wrong. Are we going to talk about where the medians are going to go and the best way to put those down? Or are we going to talk about bicycle facilities that we can't build right now?
So,
Thank you for the question, Councilor Appreciatory. The reason I brought up the funding around the median is that the ARCS project currently is funding, it was selected based on the use of a median. Since that time, there was recognition that in order for Lane Transit District's interest around bus service in the corridor, they needed to do a study. There was a desire not to have LTD going out and doing a public engagement and us going out and doing a public engagement in the corridor in parallel and not necessarily concurrent, but overlapping to some extent, that there was certainty around the fact that we needed to merge those two things together so that we had one conversation to discuss the entire corridor and its what the facility, what the components of the corridor needed to have in it. I just wanted to be honest and candid with you that the ARCS funding is only around medians at present. So when the facility plan, whatever form or shape it may take, once that is complete, the ARCS funding could be applied to a median component, but I believe that we will be reassessing with ODOT and the ARCS funding program what other funding could be applied, again, as I said, in different segments so that it is manageable. So in regard to the bicycle lanes, the reason we have proposed staff and consultants to take the one bicycle facility off of the table is that is being responsive to the community input we've received from the various different groups and individuals that have chosen to participate and that we have reached out explicitly for. We are not saying that we can't have that facility. As a city traffic engineer, I'm not saying we can't use that kind of facility. I would simply just put it in the context, we've been told by our community that they want something better than that. Now, that ties back directly into the whole discussion around 96 feet. 96 feet was the sideboards that council and governance team gave us as the maximum extent that was going to be considered permissible. Now, that does not obviously mean, I should say that obviously does not mean that that couldn't go wider than that in certain limited instances where the real estate is available and the impacts are low. But that was, again, for planning purposes, that's the sideboard that we were given. And so part of this discussion really is, if we want all of these different tools in the toolbox, if we pick the maximum width, any one thing, whatever those things may be, then we're going to get over 96 feet. So we're trying to winnow down to different choices and then add up what those different choices may lead us to in terms of width and in terms of effect. I hope that's responsive to your questions, Councillor.
It is, it is to an extent, but I'm just, when we're talking about these different things that eat up the real estate, it's like when they used a buffered bike lane on Fifth Street in Eugene. In order for them to do that, they eliminated one whole side of the entire Fifth Street of parking for the sake of a buffered lane. And you look at the amount of traffic they have here, and so I just don't want to get boondoggled into the amount of traffic. I mean, how much traffic would justify a raised cycle track, for example, in Springfield? I mean, that's what I just want to look at, the common sense part of it. So anyway, I totally get what you're saying, Brian, and I definitely don't want to go outside of those parameters or those sideboards for sure, based on what I'm seeing here.
So, Mayor, how about we have John just real quickly run through, because I think it's worthwhile for you all to hear. I think it addresses the issue of concern that a decision has been made about like removing the conventional bike lane, because the decision was not made. That's part of what is being brought to you to get input on before we go forward.
So Jean, this is what I'm hearing, because I'm really frustrated with it. I don't like cycle tracks at all, but I think you can still do a lot less, and 96 feet was not what those businesses wanted to hear. It's only 82 now. 96 was way out of that parameter. so the idea that we set that up was with only in a couple of places, is that going to work? So, so I think there are a lot of questions about what we're trying to, I mean, we're having a discussion about what we're even trying to accomplish with this, all of this planning, and we're getting off track with the idea that we just have this money right now, rather than look at, we're either planning for the future of the street or we're not. So it's, you know, this is the problem with this project, is that, you know, we're having a lot of they're like single issue conversations, but we're not talking about it in a comprehensive way. So maybe what we do now, and I know Leonard, you have your hand up, is rather
Yes.
than try to figure all this out right now, is that we have another meeting coming up. I'll let Leonard, if you want to, you know, whoever else had their hand up, maybe Sherry, did you have your hand up? Anyway, is get the concerns out there, and then as soon as you hear concerns, and then we'll take a look at it. Marilee and myself are on the governance team, and I really would rather we have at least you get that first look from the two people that have been working on this project the most closely before the council sees it again, so that, you know, we can give you that sort of first blush of, yep, you addressed our concerns at council, or no, you got to do a little bit more. So I'll let Councilor Steer and Councilor Moore speak, and then you guys can figure out what the heck we're going to do next.
I'll be brief, Sherry. So I understand we're going to be getting a report from the finance department about our budget shortfall that's anticipated for the next fiscal year. And I think that's going to be at the end of this month. And it distresses me that we have taken the no build option completely off the table before we have any idea how much money we're actually going to have to play with in the next year. Was there, during these community meetings, was there no sentiment at all in favor of the no build option, John?
Molly, do you have the input on that?
Well, I think that if John could speak to how the no build option is used as a comparison, but that it's not a solution to address the safety problem, that would be helpful.
And for that, Councilor Sarah, the purpose, does it address the purpose of the study? It's not that you can't always step back and say, we're not going to do anything, but in terms of, does it meet the purpose of the study? It doesn't meet the purpose of the study because it doesn't improve safety. I'm just going to step in on that because the decision strategy stuff is critical. That does not remove your decision-making ability to just decide, no, we're not going to spend the money. But
was increased enforcement considered as a possible remedy that would increase safety in that corridor?
I say, if you look at the purpose statement you have, you guys, that is a solution you can use to address safety. The purpose statement you have is about infrastructure improvements.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so am I on? My question had to do with, or my thoughts have to do with the fact that we're dealing with 50 blocks. Is that correct?
50 plus?
50 blocks
52,
plus.
yeah.
And so I think that is such I realize that we want to have a comprehensive kind of plan, but as was noted earlier, we are going to be looking at each one of those segments and approaching it somewhat differently depending on how much land, there's just a lot of issues involved. So my thought was, is there a way in which we could break this down into segments that we could actually begin to think about and look at, and at some point maybe we could say, okay, we're going to take this 5-block, 10-block section and we're going to do it so that people understand how it's going to look, which would, I don't know. I mean, I'm just saying that to me, it's so huge that it's difficult to get my mind wrapped around it, and there isn't one solution for the whole 50 blocks.
So can I step in for just a second? I heard the mayor, we need to have, additional meeting and discussion on this. I do also want to echo what Jean said. I think that if we were able to, in the next meeting, walk through the recommended approach for the next stage, you would see that we are being responsive both to the full community and to what we're hearing from all of you tonight, which is developing different design concepts for different segments that are responsive to the needs of those different particular segments.
Okay, well, see, that's what I see. We're not seeing that right now.
That's why I was hoping to get us to let John just walk through where they are and what they're suggesting. But I know that we are short on time, and Mayor, you have a city council meeting to move to.
Yes, so let's just, I don't think we're gonna get where we need to go here tonight. And let's table where we are, because I don't think we're not gonna get out of confusion here in the next 3 minutes. So let's table it. Marilee and myself are available to sit down and sort of give that first look at, okay, what would make more sense for us, and then bring it back when we bring it back in a different way as soon as possible. Same information though.
Right.
And I know that there have been a lot of reasons for this being stretched out, but it really, I think we're all experiencing what happens when we have such huge gaps between the times we talk about this. So.
Okay. Well, we appreciate everybody's time tonight. And of course, there's nothing like talking about Main Street to get us all worked up. So anyway, and
well, it was a heck of a commute. So, the travel time to get here and all.
Yes. And we're appreciating that right now. So anyway, so thank you so much. And
thank you.
we'll be back at this here real soon. Okay.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
So maybe baby steps next time. I mean, instead of 30 slides of full of packed with stuff that's hard to even grasp at the rate we were given it, where we can say, okay, well, let's do 5 slides and get through that, instead of trying to get through entire concepts and projects and then say, oh, by the way, do you got any questions, after I had 400 of them pop up in my head during the conversation.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
All right. Okay. Well, with that, I'm gonna close the work session, and we're all going to go next door for the regular session.
Quick trip.
Yeah, really. Okay. So AJ, do you need to get set up for the regular session?
It looks like it's 6:59 on my clock. So if yours matches mine, if we want to start at 7 o'clock, I'll be ready when you are ready.
Okay, well, I think we're ready. So we just need to, when you're ready, just let me know.
Okay. I'm ready.
Okay. So with that, I'm calling the regular session to order with roll call.
Mayor Lundberg,
Here.
Councillor Van Gordon,
Here.
Councillor Moe,
Here.
Councillor Moore,
Here.
Councillor Stair,
Here.
Councillor Woodrow,
Here.
and Councillor Pictionary.
Here.
Okay. So we're going to do the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, and so with that, I'm going to read the instructions. As we begin our meeting tonight, I would like to ask members of the audience who are joining us by phone or online to please keep yourself on mute until you are called to provide public testimony. There is one opportunity designated for public testimony this evening. We will hear testimony during business from the audience, which will be a time for anyone to speak for up to 3 minutes. If you are joining us online with a tablet, smartphone, or computer and wish to speak during that time, please use the chat window. It looks like a speech balloon in the upper right corner. Please send a comment to the organizer with your name, mailing address, and the subject you would like to speak about. You can select the organizer at the bottom of the chat window. I will call on you when it is your turn to speak. For people calling in by phone only, you're in listen mode only and cannot be called upon. In the order of public testimony is as follows. Anyone in person in the council chambers, AJ will notify you. 2, anyone on who has submitted a chat. 3, anyone who has submitted email in advance. If there is remaining time, Neil will read emails into the record. Okay, and with that, take first item.
Mayor, your first item is a Springfield upbeat. Item 1, Mayor's recognition, Asian and Pacific Islander Heritage Month proclamation. And Mayor Lundberg, you have this item.
I do. So this proclamation is whereas Asian and Pacific Islanders have lived and worked in Oregon for more than 200 years, contributing to the state's rich histories, economy, and culture. And whereas the vibrant history and diverse cultures of the Oregon's Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders are here to be honored and respected as a central part of our state's story and shared with all Oregonians. The month of May is nationally recognized as a time to celebrate contributions of Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders to our society and collective history. Now, therefore, I, Christine L. Lundberg, Mayor of Springfield, Oregon, do hereby proclaim May 2020 as Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month and encourage everyone in our community to join in this observance. And I will note that we did get this proclamation in soon enough to be in May. We just didn't have enough meetings to try and fit everything in. So I will try to do this next year and get it in there in time. So with that, next item.
Mayor, the next item is the consent calendar.
Okay.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the consent calendar.
I second.
Okay, Neil, would you like to call roll?
Yes, Councillor Van Gordon.
Aye.
Councillor Moe.
Yes.
Councillor Moore.
Yes.
Councillor Stair.
Aye.
Councillor Woodrow.
Aye.
And Councillor Pictionary.
Aye.
Okay, motion carries, 6 in favor, none opposed. Next item.
We have no public hearings tonight, so the next item is business from the audience. And we are looking to see if we have anyone. There is no one here in City Hall, no emails, and it appears no one has raised their hand in the chat. Let me just double check. Yes. So no one from the audience.
Okay, so we have no business from the audience.
That's correct, Mayor. No one here and no one online.
Okay, so next item.
Your next item is business from the City Council.
Okay, is there Councillor Moore?
I just wanted to say, how saddened I am by the events that have taken place in the last week, and to I had heard somebody say that elected officials should speak up, and I felt like, well, hey, yeah, they should. And then I realized I was one. So I just wanted to say that it was very fortunate that someone took a video thinking they would once again document police brutality, but instead they videotaped the torture and lynching of George Flynn. My heart was sick to watch and to realize how many times this very situation has occurred in this country and not been videotaped. As an elected official, I wanted to express my sorrow for all involved and prayer and hope for real needed change in our culture as a result of this happening last week. Thanks.
Okay. Is there other comments that others would like to make? So I will also say that Mayor Venus and Commissioner Buck and myself did put out a joint statement about what occurred in Minneapolis. I'm also very troubled by what happened there and would absolutely want us to look at Springfield as to how that is not something that would ever be something that we want to see happen. I know that Chief Lewis has also put out a statement also in regards to what happened. So anyway, and does anyone else have anything they want to say?
Only to agree with both of you that at this particular point in time, we have an opportunity to make sure it doesn't happen here, and to keep our eyes open and our ears open and be open and willing to listen and hear what folks have to say and the experiences they want to relate, so that if we do have an opportunity to make sure that it doesn't happen, or that we do our best that it can't happen, that we take that opportunity to make sure that that's the case.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Pishneri, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to touch on with what you said. I think, and I listened to and read the statement from Chief Lewis, and he really nailed it on the head. And it's in regards to the level of professionalism, and that, I can tell you it is not an easy job. I've been faced with many, many different things, many different levels of emotions involved, but never once did my emotions ever turn to being mean. And that I think that that's something like that is an anomaly, and that it sheds a terrible light on the tens of thousands of people that do their job in an amazing way and restraint, and do their job in a professional manner. It taints the whole group, but that whole population of law enforcement folks need to push forward, be professional, be kind, be respectful, and compassionate. And compassion is the key word to even surviving in that business. And I think that Springfield Police Department really is an amazing agency, and that the folks there do their darndest to do the right thing and be professional in their work.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Van Gordon.
Yeah, thank you. And I really kind of struggled to find words to kind of wrap up that, that kind of shared sentiment. And, I agree with Christine and Joe and Marilee and Sherry that, like, past the sort of pain and anger and frustration, we've got to figure out what we're going to do. And that real first step really comes with listening, and really being able to act as a community and figure out the right path forward and try to get this one right. And while recognizing the professionalism of the police force, it reminds me that there really needs to have a conversation about, like, well, what do we really need to hear? What do we really need to take away from this? And how do we sort of adjust as a community to make sure that that wouldn't happen in Springfield? And I think it's going to take a little bit of a dialogue, and I think we just have to keep working through it and keep showing up to that conversation as a community.
Yes, thank you. Okay. Anything else? Okay, yes, Councilor Moore.
That particular situation may not happen in Springfield, but I think we need to be aware that there is a pervasive way in which people are treated differently. And that's something that as a community, I want us to face and come together with. And we do have a community, we've had in the past, community of color meetings. And I think it would be worthwhile for us to make a greater effort to come together with all people in our community and listen to one another and get to know one another. And so it's not just the police situation that we need to address, it's the whole culture that exists in this country. And I think that's a lot of what people are protesting about.
Thank you. Okay. Anything else? Okay. So next item.
Mayor, the next item is business from the city manager. There's one item, a pilot project for equestrian services at the Georgia Pacific Natural Area. And Mary Bridget Smith is here for the staff report.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
This item before you is asking for authorization to execute an intergovernmental agreement with Willamette Lane and Sub, and then an easement. This has to do with the Georgia Pacific Natural Area, which is located between the Mill Race and the Willamette River. It's an area that is jointly owned by Sub and Willamette Lane and the city. It has some unofficial horseback riding that occurs. There's also the Clearwater Path and Mill Race Path that goes through that area. As you know, Willamette Lane is interested in doing equestrian services at this area. They want to do a pilot project just for this summer. Have some additional trailer parking at Clearwater Park and separate trails from Clearwater to the Georgia Pacific area, and asking for authorization. We're asking for authorization to sign the intergovernmental agreement and the temporary easement. And I'll be quiet, and if you have any other questions, let me know.
Councilor Pishneri and Councilor, what's your name? Van Gordon.
Joe Pishinari, my name.
Go ahead,
Brain freeze.
All I can see is Count on in. Go ahead, whichever.
Yeah, go ahead, Pish.
Are you sure you don't want to go other Pish?
Go for it.
Okay, so I had one of the questions that I had in reviewing the agreement is this is a water quality feature that's why the city owns it. So I guess and I didn't see the issue about water quality went through the easement from our property come up in the agreement, or water quality issues sort of come up about the piece of land in general. So is there anything particular in the actual agreement that is protecting water quality?
This temporary agreement doesn't address water quality specifically. We still maintain our ownership to the jointly owned property and can do any water quality or flood control. Not that that'd be necessary this summer, that would be necessary. We definitely would add that into any permanent agreement if Willamette Lane decides to move forward. And I can ask Willamette Lane to confirm. We've had these discussions. It's not in the agreement that we would be able to maintain water quality and do any testing or work that we would need to do.
You're on mute, Sean.
If it becomes a permanent agreement, it would probably be something more explicit in the agreement. Got it. I'm good. Thank you.
Okay. Councilor Pishinari.
So two things, just quickly on that map. I couldn't see, was there any the location of the proposed horse trails? I couldn't discern from the map if that was actually on there. And then, yeah, which isn't totally important. I was just more curious than anything else. But the other part is what Sean brought up as far as the water quality. That was something that piqued in my mind too. I was curious that I know that the McKinsey Watershed Council, along with the works of the McKinsey High Schools, the McKinsey School District, their students were going down and doing a bunch of water testing through that area in the canals. And in fact, NWMC had donated some of that equipment that they run those tests with for water quality. And I just wanted to ensure that if we were looking at the IGAs, that those students still are allowed access and permit them to do whatever testing they want to do in that water.
Okay, taking the first question, the new trails are probably not on that map. That's an older map that was showing existing things as of last summer. And to your second point, I can talk to Willamette Lane and Sub about that and make sure that those concerns are carried forward.
Sounds good to me. I'm okay with this.
Okay.
Okay. Any other comments or questions?
No.
No? Okay. So we
All right.
need a motion.
Gonna make one. I'd like to make a motion to authorize the city manager to execute an intergovernmental agreement, an IGA, and temporary easement for a pilot project allowing Willamette Lane to provide equestrian services at the Georgia Pacific Natural Area during the summer of 2020.
I second.
Okay. Neil, would you take roll call?
Yes, Councillor Van Gordon,
Yes.
Councillor Moe,
Okay,
Councillor Moore,
Yes.
Councillor Stair,
Aye.
Councillor Woodruff,
Yes.
and Councillor Pictionary.
Aye.
Okay. Motion carries, 6 in favor and none opposed. Next item.
Any additional business from our city manager?
No additional business, thank you.
And any business from our city attorney?
No business from the city attorney, thank you.
Okay. Well, I think with that, thank you everyone so much, and we are adjourned.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody.